Well, welcome to UVA. We're excited to have you here. I think there's a lot of excitement in the school too about the World Symposium and sort of bringing all these great thinkers in and looking at the work we've been doing in the school, sort of rethinking the cities and designers' roles in cities. So
Yeah.
I think I'll just get started with some questions. So in your latest book, Territories of Urbanism, I think sort of the first question that I have is, how do you define a territory of urbanism? So what is an urban territory, and what composes that? What are the pieces of a territory?
Well, the title of the book is in fact a sort of an implicit quotation and also thanking to Vittorio Gregotti, The Territory of Architecture.
Mm-hmm.
It was a book published in the 60s, half of the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And the main hypothesis of that book was the idea of enlarging the territory
Mm-hmm.
of architecture.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and of course that book really stated this need
Mm-hmm.
for architects to confront with the geographical scale.
Mm-hmm.
And in my book, I think in a different way, but I'm addressing the same problem.
Mm-hmm.
That is how to redefine the territories
Mm-hmm.
for a discipline,
Mm-hmm.
because urbanism is a discipline.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a process
Mm-hmm.
of urbanization.
Mm-hmm.
It's also the tools, it's also the way you elaborate concepts
Mm-hmm.
to look at those phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
And the need to enlarge, to open the
Mhm.
territories of
Mhm.
urbanism
Mhm.
that were, first of all, urbanism is in crisis. I mean,
Sure.
something, at least since the 70s, we
Yeah.
would say that urbanists and, in a way, also urban designers are
Mhm.
going through quite heavy criticisms
Mhm.
in terms of being expert of something that is not
Mhm.
really recognized as the possibility for someone to
Mhm.
to contain in one approach, in
Mhm.
one discipline. So I think we have to reformulate what is the territory of
Mhm.
urbanism, and that my point was to start from the epistemological status of
Mhm.
design.
Mm-hmm. So we're in a school of architecture. For many architects and throughout much of architectural history, architects have been concerned with the building or perhaps an isolated object. Why do you feel it's necessary for design disciplines, architecture, landscape architecture, urbanists, to be concerned with larger territories? Why do you feel that's necessary for today? It's a big question.
I would say, first of all, because we live in extended territories.
Mhm.
I think this should be enough as a reason.
Sure.
I mean, the habitat, the places we use, that the life we spend
Mhm.
is spent in larger spatial configurations.
Mhm.
So it's inevitable
Yep.
that we address
Yep.
those territories.
Yep, absolutely. So in your latest book, you quote Donald Schoen, who speaks of the architecture studio as reflection and action. So you practice, you teach, and you write. Could you speak maybe a little bit about the roles each of these play, sort of in how you define yourself as an urbanist and an urban thinker, and why do you think it's necessary to do or to hold all of these roles?
Mm. Yeah, I think first of all, Schoen is extremely important in his consideration of the studio.
Mm-hmm.
This way to construct knowledge
Mm-hmm.
through making things
Mm-hmm.
and through experimentation,
Mm-hmm.
exploration.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we can go even further to Dewey and the value of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think that's really fundamental, that
Mm-hmm.
scientific knowledge
Mm-hmm.
is based on that.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we are scientific,
Mm-hmm.
as well as
Mm-hmm.
Physicians or other type of tough scientific disciplines. And it's important that we reconquer
Mm-hmm.
this possibility to speak in a rigorous
Mm-hmm.
way about the city, about space,
Mm-hmm.
because also space is a very sliding topic. You know,
Mhm.
on one side, extremely intimate, the relation of our body with space, at the same time extremely public, extremely political,
Sure.
extremely. So I think that the design can play a fundamental role. Design, spatial design, so design dealing with space, and the point is how can we restructure our possibility to say something about space that can be considered not just your individual taste, not just your individual fantasy, but really belonging to research methods. And I think on that field, a fundamental battle is to be made to reconquer this place in the social arena, because otherwise we will be simply decorative. And to tell the truth, I don't want to be just a decoration.
Sure. Yeah. So I think that's an interesting response. It leads to sort of I guess, two questions, maybe dissimilar in ways. I mean, recently in architecture, maybe the most recent period is sort of deconstructivism has been a major topic, maybe the last decades in architecture. Do you see what you're doing as maybe a return to structuralism, or more informed structuralism in a way?
Well, I think that we should, of course, go beyond this kind of black and white contrasted, because at the same time I think that we need deconstructivism. And in fact my previous book, that was the elementary city, la città elementare, that has not been translated in English, just one chapter of it has been published in a book, was the idea that we need to deconstruct, to read the very strange forms and also really materials that are going to be close together and defining strange or maybe unknown spaces. We need the construction. I still think that the constructive approach can be extremely interesting. But of course then the problem is also to reconstruct. So once you have understood certain mechanisms of aggregation, when you have understood, when you think at least to have grasped some of the complexity of such connections and the coexistences, because we were talking today of coevolution, but coevolution means also coexistence. So you live close to each other and you construct different relations. So deconstruction can be a very interesting way to try to understand. But also, I think that we cannot stop there, and the problem is how to reconstruct. And to reconstruct is really a difficult point in which a design and imagination, visions, utopias, I mean, values come in. So I think we need both. So I would say that I'm a structuralist, maybe. Yes, there is a rereading of structuralism. At the same time, I think we need also to have the strength to deconstruct and to abandon structures for some time. And maybe then to try to reinvent or to reformulate or to read differently. I don't think we can really invent many things, but it's more a question of understanding better, deeply, or in that sense.
That's a different way of looking.
Yes.
Yeah. So then along those points too, communicating this maybe different way of looking that maybe can become, it's very easy for designers to think this way, but we don't operate in autonomy. We don't act by ourselves. We need to support, and we need the support of many other disciplines and actors who have the power or the ability to either implement ideas or to sort of create new trajectories to the way cities or territories could be designed. What is the role of the designer in being able to sort of communicate those ideas? And how do you think effective communication, or how do you think you come to an effective way of communicating sort of this reconception that maybe is difficult to grasp at times? Okay,
let's communication maybe, not the fundamental part now. You were talking of conversations among different disciplines, different But first of all, I think as designers, urban designers, landscape designers, architects, we should first of all open our eyes and be very, very inclusive and very, very able to absorb and to maintain a curiosity, an opening towards what is around us, first of all. So in that sense, it's already multidisciplinary in the sense that you need to look at different things and try to understand, to remain extremely permeable. That I think is one fundamental part of transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary. Then I'm particularly interested in interdisciplinary but also transdisciplinary. Transdisciplinary means that you can imagine to construct a different epistemological object through this work made by different perspectives. Of course, this is it's not easy, but at the same time, I'm convinced that the project, the idea to put a projection, to put something in the future, is a way to catalyze the different point of view, which otherwise would remain fragmented, would remain maybe a collection. But so in that sense, I think that the project is really a crucial way to put things together and people together, and also disciplines together. And in this frame, I think we can play a role, yes. Yeah. But why we can play a role? Not because we have the authority or because we have the power to do it. No, by way of thought, I really think that imagination is a fundamental quality. And maybe imagination, for example, all the scholars about transdisciplinarity insist on the role of metaphors, for example. How metaphors are able really to cross fields, to go beyond the common way to imagine things. And I think that architects, designers, urbanists, they have this capacity of producing metaphors, concepts, of course related with space. And this can become a way to cross differences that can be sometimes extremely hard, for example, between hard sciences and our fields. But I think that imagination, the production of images and metaphors and concepts can be really a way to construct new discourses.
I think it's to, we had a discussion briefly yesterday over a couple of words that were within the recent Catalyst publication from UVA. Ideas of the design disciplines acting as orchestrators or leaders in part, but you suggested that we should serve more as catalysts, so sort of these moments in time where we have...
Exactly. While, in fact, it's not because the director is in fact someone that has the authority to guide the orchestra. And of course, sometimes directors, they have chaotic orchestras that are not following So in that sense, I think we are not exactly in that position. But the idea of inject in a liquid, something that can produce reactions, yes, that I think is something we might do. And maybe we have also, we are also trained in a way to produce this kind of liquid that might have a reaction with other. And I insist on that imagination, but imagination is not fantasy. Imagination is a different way to construct knowledge. It's different in the sense that you have to imagine that the step further, no? You know you want to go in a certain direction, and you have to imagine how to go there. So that's imagination. You know that you can be completely wrong, so you test different hypotheses, and finally you choose. You don't know if this will be the very good one, but step by step you construct, finally, your path. I think this is more or less imagination. It's not me. This is an American philosopher speaking about that. But I think it's fundamentally what we do as designers.
Yeah, that's. It's great to hear that, because that's really how you have positioned, I think, your writing and your practice sort of existing on this middle ground between between the top-down master plan type of view or sort of the role of the activist. You're neither of those, but you do exist sort of in this middle plane. Why do you think that you've come to that conclusion? Do you think that's a more effective way for ideas or for imagination to be, because we don't have the answers, so you think we have to exist in that middle place?
Yeah, but I think not the activists, because I think that you, in a more rigorous way, you need to maintain a distance. So this critical distance is important. This doesn't mean that we are not attentive, we are not trying to construct, also co-construct and make ideas evolve together, no? With the way in which you discuss with people, you understand from the different situation. This is fundamental. But at the same time, you need to maintain a certain distance. Otherwise, you are simply completely into, and then you probably miss the opportunity, for example, to insert some change, to propose change. The critical distance means also that you can be critical, which fundamentally you cannot if you are totally inside it. So this from the activist side, from the top down, of course, because top down is completely stupid, I would say, is the lack of understanding, is the idea that you have a sort of power that can give you the possibility to impose. I'm not really interested in that. So that's why I think this middle ground is a little bit, is asking for a lot of efforts in understanding, which means with your eyes, with your ears, with your feet, with mapping, with words, analyzing and understanding imageries, symbols, as well as very concrete and physical things. So, of course, this asks a lot of time. It's time-consuming, but at the same time, it's so rich. And I think that the distance you can maintain is also a way to introduce something different. So it's not a sort of mimetic attitude. I don't think we have to become sort of expert in mimetism. On the contrary, we have to maintain this possibility to detach and to elaborate a criticism. But it has to be the result of this understanding. Otherwise, I think it's completely unuseful.
So last question, I think. So talking about this critical distance, what advice do you have for students of architecture today for maybe how to, who are interested in approaching a new way of designing to address issues of urbanity and sort of territory today? What advice do you have for students?
I don't know. I think reading. I think we have to read. Fundamentally, we are inside such complex and layered and rich tissue. So, taking the time to read situations, to read authors, not to be on the surface of, I don't know, the very last novelties. I mean, I think we need this kind of attitude in which the reading operation is probably the one, the more modest, at the same time the one that can be revolutionary.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.